This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so welcome to, I think this is lecture 11, and we are going to continue where we left off. We finished chapter 5 in part 1 of the Guide of the Perplexed, so we're about to start chapter 6. In the Pines version, that is page 31 in volume 1. In the Kapach, if anyone's following in the Hebrew Kapach, it would be page Chaf Dalet, page 24, and I'm going to put out a link for right now in the chat for where it is on the wait, I'm sorry. I'm going to put in the chat a link for where it is. There it is. Okay. To click on to go to where it is in Sefaria, and which is the Friedlander translation. So right in this section of the Mor Nevuchim, the Rambam is going through language, and translating words and demonstrating how words mean different things in different contexts. And it's general. A lot of people consider this like kind of like a boring part of the book, and I very much thought about kind of skipping over it, and maybe at some point we will, but today I felt like I want to just continue because there's a lot of interesting points, and this may prove to be really interesting. I was also speaking with my father about it and kind of regretting the fact that it's so important as a key to the main concepts that the Rambam is going to talk about in this entire book. Without understanding the way he uses language to interpret the verses in the Torah and in the words of the prophets, it's very difficult to understand the concepts and how he relates it to the Torah. So the Rambam starts with this for a good reason. So I'm going to keep going with it, and hopefully, and maybe later on we'll skip, but right now we're just going to continue. That's number one. Because this is a discussion of language, and in keeping with the last couple of weeks, I talked about an article, a scholarly article on the Rambam, and I made it available to those that were interested. I'm going to do the same thing this time, somewhat not totally related to what the Rambam is about to talk about, but it is related to how he understands language in general. So I'll send out to anyone that wants to see it an article written by Menachem Kellner, who's a professor at the University of Haifa, who's one of the leading Maimonidean scholars of the day, and he wrote, the article is called Maimonides on the Normality of Hebrew, normality as in normal. This is one area where many of us, it's a controversy between Maimonides, Rambam, and Nachmanides, the Ramban, who openly disagreed with Maimonides on this, about whether or not there's any special holiness, inherent holiness to the Hebrew language, or is the Hebrew language simply not just another language that happens to be the language used for the Torah, happens to be the language that the prophets were spoken to by God, and happens to be the language that God taught Adam, because as we know from Bereshit, from Genesis, that Adam was speaking Hebrew to God, so it was like the first language, so to speak. So it's an interesting article, and it really brings to the forefront this the Rambam's general philosophy, that he tends to go towards rationalistic explanations of things. And according to the Rambam, the reason why the language of Hebrew is special is not because it has any inherent holiness. It's a language just like every other. And we'll see that in the way he deals with the words that we're going to learn one by one, the terms that we see, he deals with them in the same way he would deal with any other language. And views Hebrew is called the Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, only because it doesn't have words in it. The original Hebrew language doesn't have words for dirty concepts, vulgar concepts. Modern Hebrew has managed to find some words for all kinds of not such pretty ideas, but the classical Hebrew simply doesn't have a way of expressing dirty ideas. So the Rambam says that's why it's called Lashon Kodesh, but not because of any inherent holiness. This is a major debate that Rambam had with many of his contemporaries, but it's kind of indicative of a deep philosophical divide between Rambam and other thinkers. So if anyone's interested, and I saw some people are texting me, I'll make sure to get everyone copies of the article. I think you'll find it very interesting. And it can also give you a little bit of background to the chapters we study tonight and the chapters we're going to study as we go through the Chelik Rishon, the first part where he talks about language. All right. That aside, now we'll go on. I'm about to read chapter 6. Ish v'isha, the two words that this is a short chapter, and this chapter is more demonstrating. Rambam this is a very uncontroversial chapter. This one, it seems so obvious, but then we'll see later that there will be other terms that aren't so obvious, that are a little bit more controversial. But when we see that you can do the same thing with the words ish v'isha, and you'll understand what I mean in a minute, then clearly you should be able to do that same thing with other terms. So ish v'isha, Rambam says, are two terms that mean a man and a woman. It literally refers to a human man and a human woman. A human male, a human female is the actual meaning of the word ish v'isha. However, after that they become used figuratively to refer to the male or female of any species, not just man and woman, but also like it says in Noah, before the flood, that when the animals came to live on the ark, it says you should take 7 of the kosher species of animals, the man and his woman. So clearly, even though Ish and Isha is literally referring to a human being, you see it already, that same term being used to refer to an animal male and an animal female. And then you also see the term you further being borrowed to refer to anything, and this we use today in terms when we talk if you're taking a screw and like screwing it into something with a receptacle. So now in building we say that's the female versus the male, and something penetrating and something being penetrated. So this is and the Rambam says you'll find those terms also being used to refer, like at the building of the tabernacle, we'll see the 5 curtains should be coupled together, a woman to her sister, Isha alachota, meaning that there was loops and hooks, Isha alachota. And so the Rambam is saying it's obvious to us that the term Ish v'isha, even though the actual translation is one thing, the words can clearly be used to mean something else, but it's just related to the original meaning. And then similarly, he says, we have the same idea with achot and ach, with a brother and a sister. We find the similar uses, and the Rambam doesn't give examples. So this is pretty simple, pretty uncontroversial, and makes a lot of sense, and it works. But for some reason, we'll find in other places where the Rambam tries to do the same thing, we'll say, oh, now I understand what the verse meant, and it wasn't so obvious. So it's just applying these ideas. And let's go on to chapter 7. So the next one, he'll give more examples. It'll be a little bit more interesting. So Yalad, or Yalad, right? Yalad means to give birth. Leidad, Lamed Daled, refers to giving birth to something. Ha'inyan, the Rambam says, the notion is well known. It means procreation, right? Giving birth, one being gives birth to another. A woman gives birth to a child. So as we see, v'yaldu lo vanim, it's just one verse out of many, which refers to giving birth to children. However, after it's been used referring to giving birth to children, it was hushal. The word was lent out to be used for something else, and that is bringing anything into being. And the example that the Rambam gives is before the mountains were brought forth. That is a verse in Psalms and Tehillim 90, where it says, "B'terem harim yuladu," that all in the old days, in the days of creation, mountains were born. What does it mean they were born? It means they came into being. Okay. And then it also it refers to, we see the language being used in Yeshaya, "Holy dove hitzmicha," the ground gave birth to the plants. So again, it's being borrowed to use for something else. And that, and then it also means what happens in a certain particular time period. So like something happened, what will happen on a certain day becomes what will that day give birth to? Again, using the term Yalad. So again, but then it gets even further. It derived even more to mean when a person is thinking about something and his mind gives birth to an idea, and this is where it gets interesting. So he first brings a verse in Psalms where it says "V'yolad shaker," and I want to look at this a little bit, because "V'yolad shaker" means and he gave birth to falsehood, or it bore falsehood. So this is from Tehillim 7, Psalms 7. And over here, I'm just going to read a little bit because there's various ways to understand it. And the way the Rambam just explained it, it really brings it out nicely. The Psalms is of course, it's being stated by David HaMelech, by King David, and he's speaking about how God is Elohim Shofet Tzaddik. God judges the righteous righteously, and God also gets angry and pronounces anger towards the wicked every day. And then the next several verses talks about a wicked person. Imlo Yashuv, if he doesn't change his ways, Charbo Yotosh, he will sharpen his sword to chase after me. In this case, I'm reading it the way Radak understands it. Me meaning David being chased by his enemies. Kashto dorach vaychonuneh, he bends his bow, his bow, and aims it at me, and so on. And then it says, and the wicked person, I'm skipping to verse 15, Hine yichabel oven, which means he is, this is the language of chavle leda, of birth pangs. So his labor, the work that he does in order to produce something is oven, is evil. V'hara amal, and his pregnancy, right, is amal, is pain, and pain that he wants to cause someone. V'yolad shaker, and that which he gives birth to is sheker, is falsehood or fraudulent. And this is how he describes an evil person. So the Rambam is saying we're using this metaphor of v'yolad, and gives birth to, right, as the machinations of an evil mind. In this particular case, it's talking about the evil thoughts that he has. So we're using again, so that word leda, of giving birth, has come a far way from what it originally meant. It originally meant giving birth, and now it means the bad ideas and plans of an evil person. Or it could be, in theory, the good ideas and plans of a good person. So then the Rambam says another example, which is very interesting, from a very famous chapter in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 6. But before that, I want to read a little bit of the context in Isaiah there, because Isaiah chapter 2 is one of the most famous chapters in all of the Torah and all of the Bible. It reads, it's talking about the time of the Mashiach, the time of ultimate redemption, and it says, "V'hayab," it will be at the end of days. And Nachon yeh har beit Adonai b'rosh ha'arim, the mountain of the Lord's house will be established properly on the tops of the mountains, and it will be uplifted over all the high places, and all the nations of the world will come to God, and all the nations will come. L'chuven alel har Adonai el beit Elohei Yaakov, let us all go to the mountain of God. Let's all gather at the house of the Lord of Yaakov, Yareinu midrachav, so he can teach us his ways. And the Kimitzion Teitzei Torah, because it's from Zion that the word of Torah goes out to all the nations of the world. U'dvar Adonai Yerushalayim. And then God will judge between the nations, and he will bring peace among all the nations. And they will beat their swords into plowshares, and so on. One nation won't bring a sword against another. War will no longer be waged. And then so those are some of the most famous verses in the entire Bible. So Beit Yaakov that continues and says, Yeshayahu then turns his attention from this grandiose world vision and looks at the people of Yaakov, the people that he's speaking to, the house of Jacob, the people of Israel. You need to go and walk in the light of God. Why? Because you have forsaken your own ways, you house of Jacob. He's giving them rebuke. Because you have filled yourselves up, and there's a lot of different ways to translate this, but the Maimonideans would translate it as follows. And you could look at the Ibn Ezra, you can look at Radak, and you'll see they have filled themselves up mikedem from the Eastern ways, from the magical and sorcerous and idolatrous and pagan ways that come from the East. V'oninim, and you are doing soothsaying kaplishtim like the Philistines. And then it ends uviyaldei nachrim yaspiku. The non-Maimonideans understand those three terms meaning, and uviyalde, and with the children of strange people, of non-Jews, of Gentiles, yaspiku, you are playing with, or you are, you're involved with the children that you've had with Gentiles. So the non-Maimonideans would, if you literally translate this verse, it sounds like a condemnation of intermarriage and assimilation. However, the Rambam understands this to mean uviyaldei nachrim, meaning, and in the foreign, those ideas that are born, that in people's minds that are foreign from the path of Judaism, foreign from the path of God, yaspiku, those are the ideas that you are walking in. Those are the ideas that you are keeping. So Ishayahu is not here condemning intermarriage, but rather he's condemning the foreign ideas, the ideas of sorcery, the ideas of idolatry, the ideas of paganism that the people have adopted. So here the reason this is really important, because now we understand why the Rambam is trying to tell us and trying to bang into our heads, right? How important it is to understand the language. Because if you take the word Yalad and you understand it in its literal manner, you come out with an entirely different meaning of that verse, right? Than you would if you would understand that Yalad doesn't always mean a child. It means other things. And in this case, it means a false idea, or in this particular case, false ideas, but the person could give birth in their mind to good ideas too. But it's referring to the things. We also say a person hatches in his mind. It's very similar. We give birth to ideas in our mind about certain things. So then we extend it a little further. In this sense, the Rambam says, Maimonides says, whoever instructs an individual, if I teach you some idea, right, in some matter, and teaches him an opinion, then it is as if I made you something. I gave birth to you, right? And we find this throughout the words of the of Chazal, but Rambam says we see used the prophets' students are called the Bnei Hanavim, the sons of the prophets. Why are they called the sons? Because when the prophets teach their disciples the ideas about God and so on, they therefore become, in a figurative way, they become sons, they become children of theirs. So there, and here, and this is what in my catch line when I announced tonight's lecture, I mentioned what makes a human being human. So now the Rambam is Maimonides is going to tie together for us a bunch of things that we studied together tonight and on previous nights. In this figurative sense, it is said of Adam. I was just reading from the Pines translation, and this is from Bereshit, and he says, I'm going to read the verse. It says, "Vayechi Adam shloshim u'masana," and Adam lived for 130 years. Vayoled bidmuto kitzalmo, and he gave birth to someone that has his demut and his tzelem. And remember, we studied this, I think, 2 lectures ago, what demut and tzelem means according to Rambam. Demut and tzelem would mean the form and the shape. Adam gave birth to someone in his form and his shape, right? And then, however, vayoled banim ubanot, and it also says, and he gave birth to other children, sons and daughters. So what does this mean that at 130 he gave birth, and he called this person that he gave birth to Seth, right? So Shet had something that was demuto v'tzalmo, that was the form and substance of Adam, that all the other sons and daughters did not have. So Adam had lots and lots and lots of children that were not demuto v'tzalmo, right? And Seth had this demut v'tzelem. Now, think back about what Rambam said about what demut and tzelem meant, right? He said that when God said, let's make man with our demut and our tzelem. Does anyone remember what Maimonides said that meant? Does anyone want to, if you can tell me, if you remember a little bit about what Maimonides says, what did it mean when God said, well, let's make man in our demut, our tzelem? And then why would that explain this verse? Why only Seth was born b'dmuto v'tzalmo, but not all the other sons and daughters? Anyone want to venture a guess before we read on the next line? If I don't have any takers, I'll be, no hands, nobody's raising a hand. Okay. So dmuto v'tzalmo meant, right, it was referring to the man's intellect, man's ability to understand between good and evil, man's ability to understand what's right and what's wrong, man's ability to have that intellect, which made, so there, and according to Maimonides, that is what makes a person a person. So all those other sons and daughters that did not go on the path, the proper path of knowledge of God, right, they weren't totally human. Right, they only Seth continued that tradition of knowledge, that tradition of intellect, that which makes Seth specially human, which is why it says he was the Yalad b'dmuto v'tzalmo. Because remember, I remind us, I already explained to you what Tselem, Adam, and Dmuto, what they are. So all of those other children that came before Seth and actually afterwards too, they didn't reach in truth that surah, that essence of humanity, right? Which is the essence that makes a human being. That which, when it said Tselem Elohim, that a man is made in the form of God uvitmuto. Avol Shet, however, Seth, Kivan Shalimdo, because he taught him, Vehevino, and he led him to understand the concepts of God, and he came to fulfillment, a human fulfillment. Shet knew and understand the world around him and was taught wisdom by his father. Therefore, it says, Nemar bo vayoled bidmuto kitzalmo. That's why he was the one who carried on that heritage of knowledge. The others forget about it, right? I'm reading from the Kapach Hebrew translation for a second. And you already know that if someone never achieves that, intellectually never achieves anything special about being a person, and simply lives according to his animal nature and just does what he does because he wants to, and does what, because it feels right or whatever, without thinking about whether it's right or wrong, without thinking about how things should be, without having any knowledge of its purpose or anything, that Adam, that person isn't really even human. He's just an animal, so he might have the shape of a human being, but he's not actually a person. He's an animal just like anything else. There's a little bit of an inkling of the Rambam's understanding that the human animal is just like every other animal, right? Unless we use the special things that we're given, which is our intellect and our morality, in order to and then he continues, right? In order to be better. And even though the human being might be smarter, that doesn't mean anything, because the Rambam continues and says, this human being who's just a form of an animal but has a brain, and if he doesn't use his intellect to think about it in a moral, ethical way, then he's simply a more destructive than the animals. There's animals, but he can be much worse because he can do much more damage, because as a human, he's smart enough to really cause problems, right? Right? Because the thought process and the logic which this human being has, if he doesn't put any godliness into that which was given to him in order to achieve perfection, but if he doesn't use it to achieve perfection, Mishtamish ba b'mini hatachbulot hamaviot l'rotz v'hamtzas nezakim. Then he uses that same skill to cause damage and to cause suffering and to cause pain. This is extremely enlightening, because of what the Rambam is telling us, that that wisdom, the intelligence that makes a human human, is not just the fact that we're intelligent, that we're able to think. That's also an animal characteristic. It's just really good. We can, but if we use it for selfish purposes and not for godly purposes, then we're like an animal, but even worse. However, if we use it for the proper purposes, then we are an actual human being. Then we can call ourselves people. And the person who uses it for evil, it's like he's similar to a person. And those were the children that were born prior to Shes, before Seth. And when it says in the, and he brings a medrash, a famous, somewhat famous medrash of the rabbis who would say that all those 130 years, the children that Adam had were ruchot, were demons and shadim. So if you take that medrash literally, then that's the origin of demons. But if Rambam doesn't believe in demons, and he'll say that several times, but this is one of them, right? So the Rambam said it doesn't mean that he gave birth to demons. He gave birth to children. They were human beings, but they didn't go on the right path. They didn't use their brain for the right purpose. So they're as good at they're demons. They're bad, right? And but when he put the effort into raising Shet properly, that is when it says that he had bitmuto kitzalmo and so on. So this was so this is how the Rambam shows us he went a long way. This is a short chapter. From the word Yalad, right? Which means to give birth to a son, or daughter, to a child, and when he went all the way to understanding, this idea, what makes a human being, and how that is inherent in this word Yalad. So again, we see how important this idea is. That translating words is a very very profound. I mean, it's really important to reading these verses. We read those verses in Psalms. We read the verse in Isha and Isaiah, and the understanding of Genesis. So I think that's the reason why I chose not to skip all of this. We're going to go on to chapter 8, where he talks about the word Makom, place, which is also very important. Any comments or questions before I move on regarding the topic of Yalad, of giving birth? Anyone want to ask anything or mention anything?
Yeah, just one question. Where does he find textual support for the idea that Adam had all of these things before Seth? Well, Cain and Abel, okay. So Abel dies, so he's out of the picture. And right. Cain, he's a bad guy. But where are the others that?
How do the others children? The verse says, "Vayoled banim uvanot." You look in Genesis, it says, and he gave birth to sons and daughters. The Torah says that he had other children, just doesn't say anything about them.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we often forget about them because that's all the Torah says, is that they were born, but we don't know anything more than that.
Okay. Specifically, what faculty did Seth possess that was lacking in the other children? And
so the Torah doesn't really tell us more than just this verse, right? About Shes, about Seth. But the Torah gives us, when it gives the lineage of Adam all the way to Noah, right? It picks from each, one son out of, from each person. As they all had many kids, but it picks one. And in our tradition, that son was the one that carried the knowledge of God to the next generation. But it's not explicit in the Torah, but it is implicit, because it seems that each generation had someone who was outstanding. And in the first case of Adam's children, it was Shes, it was Seth. But the Torah doesn't tell us many details about his life, except this verse here, Bitmutzo Kitzalmo, which the Rambam would then say this would be the source of the tradition. The only way you would understand this as a source of the tradition is if you use the Rambam's explanation. Bitmuto Kitzalmo means that he bequeathed to this particular son, for whatever reason, these qualities. Maybe he tried to teach all the kids and none of them were interested except for Shays. I don't know. But someone learned and it was Shays. Any other questions about this issue before we go to Makom? If there aren't, then we will go on to Makom, and Makom is chapter 8. So Makom, the word Makom in Hebrew
Can I ask
means.
one other question?
Oh, please go ahead. Yes.
I was just looking at 5:5, the Genesis. It says all these other kids were after Seth and after the birth of Seth. Adam lived 800 years and begot sons and daughters. So all these people came later than Seth. So how does that make sense?
Yeah, and Rambam says that they were born beforehand. So
Okay.
so I don't know that it's a good question. I think the Rambam was just being non-specific, because I think that for that 130 years, we have a tradition that the rabbis were referring to with those demons, that Adam had descendants from before then. And but the actual verse says that they were born afterwards. So I think it's the assumption of the Rambam is that they were actually born before and after.
Oh, before and after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that's a good question. It's a very
You
good
think
question.
after Seth was born, he would keep having then human type people with intellect and all that stuff. Okay.
Mhm.
And do we assume that since Adam and Eve were the only people on Earth, that the only way that the humanity moved forward is that brothers married sisters?
That's the assumption in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
There's the rabbinic tradition that each one was born with a twin sister. That's just not written about. That would have to be the assumption. You can make other assumptions that there were other beings, there were other, but that's whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
You have to make some kind of assumption like that. Any other comments about Yalad?
Well, they could have been cousins, by the way, because it says Enosh comes along. So and then after the birth of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and begot sons and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have been other people, cousins.
Could have been, yes. Okay, so now Makom is the next chapter, and here is the word Makom is place. Now, many of us might be familiar with the fact that Makom is also often used as a name of God, and we'll get a little bit of better understanding of that as we read through the Rambam now. So if this word Makom means a place. That's how Maimonides starts. And however, the word Makom ended up meaning a person's place in society, his rank. So like know your place. We have that in English too. You should know your place. It doesn't mean a physical place. It means you should know that this guy's at top of you and this one's below you. You got to know your position, right? So and it could mean like how, like what's your place, like how have you achieved the level, right, of education, of skill to be in that place. One person, if you have a law degree and you have 10 years experience practicing law, then it would be appropriate for you to stand in court and defend a client, right? But if you never went to law school and you don't know anything, then that's not your place, right? You don't have business being there, right? So the place meaning you achieve a certain place based on your qualities and experience, etc. So that's the next level of where the word Makom has come to. And then we also use the phrase the Rambam says he reached Mimale Makom Abosav. He's occupied the place of his ancestors, right? So if a person has an illustrious ancestor who was well known as a great scholar or whatever it was, the person reaches his place by achieving that level, by becoming, so now then the Rambam is gonna get, that's what it means when it says Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkomo, right? Blessed is the honor of God Mimkomo, from his place. Now here, Maimonides this is the real reason why he's talking about Makom and place. Why? Because we find very often we talk about God's place, and many interpreters would therefore assume that God has a place. God is in heaven, or wherever it is you think God's place is. He has a special room up there, and that's God, where he hangs out. That's where his throne is. That's where he is. However, that concept, that idea, doesn't figure into Maimonidean theology at all. So he needs to. So Mimkomo means Kefima Allah Soberom and Muskvodobim Tzilas. I'm reading from the Hebrew translation. When it says, "Blessed is God, blessed be the glory of the Lord from his place," it means the greatness of God, the rank of God, which is so much. It is a rank. It is a place. It's something we can't comprehend. It's something we can't describe. It's something we can't even relate to as human beings. But it is. And that's the blessing. When you say the blessing of God comes from his place, it means comes from that place which is so far off from our understanding. And therefore, whenever it refers to God and it refers to a place, right, it refers to the intent is is the greatness of God's existence, of God's reality, which is way beyond, right, anything we can compare it to. Nothing that we can compare, as we will explain throughout the course of this book, that and it uses the word place to refer to God's rank and position, which is so special, so different. Now, and here Rambam says something which is really crucial. I'm giving you all these instructions and giving you all these words and how to translate these words. I'm talking in my own words. I'm not reading from one of the translations. I want you to know, Rambam says, that now that I'm giving you these words, you can now take what I'm telling you and apply it to every text you ever read. So when you read through the Torah and you see a term, think about what the Torah is saying in that verse, and think about what is the most appropriate meaning for that word in that context. So the Rambam is saying, take the wisdom, the truth, the knowledge, whatever you have, when you go to a verse, look at it and try to think what this verse is really saying. What do these words really mean? Okay? Don't just look at the surface meaning of the word and translate. Don't just take the word makom and say place. Look at the context and think, does this really mean a physical place, or does this mean something else? So the Rambam is giving us permission. He's saying, I can't write in just one book every single word and how to interpret everything in the Torah and everything that the rabbis say and so on. But I can give you these instructions and tell you that look at the word, remember that the word has many different meanings, look at the context, and you will and you'll get it. So now I'll read from the words of the Rambam. I'm going to read from the English, from the Pines translation. I'm at the bottom of page 33 in the Pines. Know with regard to every term whose equivocality we shall explain to you in this treatise. This treatise means this book. That our purpose in such an explanation is not only to draw your attention to what we mentioned in that particular chapter. In other words, don't take the word Yalad and only think about the verses that I said, or Makom, and think about only this verse of where it uses the word Makom. Rather, do we open a gate and draw your attention to such meanings of that particular term as are useful for our purpose, not for the various purposes of whoever may speak the language of this or that people. As for you, you should consider the books of prophecy and other works composed by men of knowledge. Reflect on all of the terms used therein, and take every equivocal term in that one from among its various senses that is suitable in that particular passage. So this is how you're supposed to learn. The Rambam is giving us instructions how to learn Torah. And this is really crucial. And that's why I didn't want to skip over this. That's why these little ideas on how to translate words is the Rambam's key to learning Torah, period. Always think, what is this actually saying? What does this word mean in this context? These words are the key to this treatise. This is the key to this entire book. and to others, and to all books that you're going to read, all holy books at least. A case in point being the explanation. So how, for example, I just told you that the word makom means not just a physical place, but a status or so on. Let's give an example. Being the explanation we have given here of the meaning of the term place in the following dictum of the scripture. Baruch Baruch Kvod Hashem Imkomo, right? So that's a good example. Now look at that verse and think, what does this really mean? Does this really mean that God's blessing comes from his place, like he has an actual address, 1234 Main Street, right? Of course not. Of course, that's not what it means. It must mean something else. So this is a good example, but there's another example. And this is from Exodus where it was God is up with talking with Moses on the top of the mountain, and God tells to Moshe, he says, "Lo tuchal lirot et panai," you cannot see my face, ki lo yirani adam v'chai. Human being can't see me and live. All right, this is not the verse the Rambam is about to quote, but this verse itself. Remember, we talked about what seeing meant. I think that was last week, right? What does it mean that God says a human being can't see me? Right? Does it mean sight with eyes? No, it means understand. A human being cannot comprehend me and still be a living creature. But then God continues and says, "Vayomer Adonai hinei makom iti v'nitzavto al atzor." Here is a place with me, right? Stand here at this rock. There's a little space in the rock here. Stand here. This is my place. This is a place with me. Now think about it. Rambam says, you should know that the very this word, the way I'm translating makom, now look at that verse and stop thinking about a mountain and a rock and where God's telling him to stand. And that's
I think we just lost him.
The weather is pretty tough here.
I thought it was just me.
No, he went to a different place.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly what happened to him.
Yeah, you lost me for a bit there too.
Okay. Hopefully he'll join us shortly.
Yeah.
You might have to leave and come back. I don't know sometimes.
Oh yeah, they're having they're having in Alabama a big storm, right? Yeah.
Where?
Soon will be. Yeah, there's like tornadoes and
Does someone
Yeah.
have his email or text to text him? I don't.
I can text him.
Yeah, I just let him know.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if he got it, but we'll see.
Let's hope he notices.
yeah.
He's still going. He's like, darn, where did we stop?
I can totally see him doing that.
He just gets so excited. Okay.
Oh, we have another, this thing goes on with these definitional things for another 25 chapters. I wonder if we're going to go through all of them before we get to,
Wow.
the goes on to chapter 31 is when we'll go back to other subjects.
Did somebody was able to text him?
Yeah, he said he lost internet.
Oh, that's a
okay.
problem.
He might be, I wonder if he's able to reestablish it. Let me ask.
Maybe it'll come in through his phone, actually, potentially.
So he just said that a large storm knocked his internet out.
Oh,
So he said he's gonna try to reconnect, but
maybe hope.
yeah, I'm not really sure where to go from there.
No.
So I
You can
guess
use
yeah,
his cell phone. You can use his cell phone. If you can text that to him.
Right, presumably cellular service is still happening.
That's a good picture of him frozen like that.
No, I'll take a picture and send it to him.
Oh,
He's trying.
Maybe.
I just suggest that he come back on his phone. Let's see.
He said he'll try to connect through his phone.
Okay.
But does he control the Zoom?
Yeah.
so-
He can
Probably.
log on his
He's the host.
phone
He's
theoretically.
the host.
Oh, clearly the Zoom is still up. Otherwise it would have dropped all of us.
Right.
Right.
So
Someone
he
was
should be able to
probably
join his
gonna-
own Zoom from another device, namely his phone.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Right. So you're on mute.
Shaul,
Oh, is he back?
he was momentarily, he was on his
He
phone.
was on his phone, but he's there.
He's on mute.
He's connecting to audio.
Are you guys able to see me now?
Now
Yes.
we can,
Yeah.
We can
Okay.
see and hear.
Now we
there's-
can see and hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's like a big storm and I lost internet. I don't have any internet. Oh, wait, it looks like it just came back on my computer.
yeah, we can see you.
I'm going to try to get on my computer again.
Okay, we can see. you.
Yeah, you lost me at one point too.
I'm sorry. It's really stormy here.
Yeah. Hey, well, I took a picture of your frozen face. You'll be happy to know you looked very engaged and intelligent.
Okay.
That's all we
All
can
right.
do in situations. Like you're on. You got two
Okay, so-
devices.
Okay, so now I just took off one device. So I want to see if I could record it again.
It's still
It's still
recording.
recording according to us.
Okay, it's still recording.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I thought I left on my phone. Okay, well, anyway, where was I up to when I got cut off?
Well, behold, there's a place by me.
Yeah, so Hine Makom iti, right? There's a place by me, which is in on the rock, right? So, and Rambam was telling us that you should be able to look at this verse and stop thinking about an actual place in a rock and start thinking that this is the Makom. This is it's referring to there's the place with me, meaning well, I mean, remember how he said God made human beings b'dmutov kitzalmo. At this lofty level, you can be next to me, right? But you can't be me, which would be the meaning if you look at the whole context of the thing. In this verse, the term signifies a rank in theoretical speculation and contemplation of the intellect, a place where Moshe was able to achieve, right? Not that of the eye, right? Not when God said to see me, right? You can't see me. It doesn't mean refer to actual sight. This being in addition to the meaning alluding to a local place. It happened to be that this encounter took place while Moshe was on the mountaintop next to a rock, right? But that was to be found on the mountain, which the separation, achievement, and perfection came to pass. This is where Moshe reached that high, lofty level where God was able to say, Makom iti, there's a place next to me, right? But it doesn't not actually referring to a physical place. So again, we now know that Rambam is explaining to us the significance, how to take the word Makom, the word place, and how to apply its proper meaning in the proper context. All right, I see someone's raising their hand, so go ahead.
So the discussion of Makom and it not being physical is really interesting, and has manifest in other ways in our traditions. For example,
Yes.
the prayer that's said when we leave a house of mourning.
Yes,
Hamakom inecha.
right. So think. So when it refers to God as a Makom, that's interesting to think about, like why we choose to use that name of God in that context. What do you think? That'll take some thinking, but do you have an idea?
Yeah, because the mourner, and for that matter, the consoler, are, you never know where they are in the sense that they can be in any emotional or spiritual place, and God, the point is that they should be able to be reached by God wherever they are and wherever God may be for them. That's my, Makom is the place in that sense,
Right.
which is the omnipresence of God, not just from a physical perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a nice way of putting it. That's interesting. Any other thoughts or comments on this? Because this, and I really, the Rambam really gave us permission, to take these ideas and these concepts and apply it whenever we read the Torah. So you can read a verse and you can look at the translation, and then you can decide, but I think this word here means something else. Go ahead.
Forgive me, but I think he's more than giving us permission. I think he is challenging or maybe even mandating that we have to push through to try to work to understand.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Thank you.
Can I just ask, for the next 21 chapters, I think
Right.
we have these different terms. Are you going to then, in subsequent classes, take us through each of these chapters through chapter 30, I believe?
I don't know. What do you guys think? I have several ideas of how to do this. I do want to bring people to the attention of an article each time. I'm going to try without a promise, but I already have collected about 20 of them. But I'm going to try to bring up an article so that those that want to read, other sources of thoughts about the Rambam besides what I'm teaching here. But I'm trying. I might continue. I have other ideas, and that is to go through some of them, maybe skip towards some concepts and ideas that he brings up later on that are pretty famous and important. I don't know. I'm not sure. I have different. If anyone has requests or suggestions, I'll take them.
Are you going to give these articles to everybody, or do we have to make a request?
I guess I could send it. How would be the best way to send it out? I have the WhatsApp chat. I could send a PDF on the WhatsApp to everyone. That's what I'll do.
Okay.
That would be the best.
Yeah, I'll just do it that way. That's a good idea. All right, and then you don't. Each person can just download it from there. Those who are I have a text messaging chat for some mostly Alabamans, so you guys can just text me your email address if you're not in the WhatsApp chat. I think most of the people are, but if you're not, just text me. But that's what I'll do. I'll send it out right after the class is over. And I always keep my eyes out for articles on Maimonides, especially when they're related to Moreh Nevuchim specifically.
One more point as we're coming in on Pesach. There is one of the brachos in the Haggadah which starts Baruch HaMakom.
Yes. Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu. Yeah. Okay. Very familiar.
Right. No, I'm just, but again, it's. I mean, I've used it as a discussion point in my Sederim. Why is this discussion here? Why is this one of the 70 names, and how does it relate?
So now that we studied how Rambam does it, you can have a new perspective in your Seder this year. Try to use what Rambam just taught us about what Makom means to decide how that applies to the Seder. I think it talks about the 4 sons, and each 4 of the sons has a specific place. It's actually very apropos. I just thinking off the top of my head. Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu, Baruch Shenasan Torah Yisrael. Then it does connect our Banim. It's talked about the 4 different sons, the evil one, the smart one, and each one has his place, right? Each child has his or her place in society, in the family. I think it's a very appropriate choice. That's a thought. All right, now I got something to say for the Seder. Thank you. Yeah, so I will, Belinetter, I hope to have this class next week again. And then after that, I'm gonna go offline for 2 weeks because of Pesach. I'm traveling to Israel on Wednesday, the 13th. So that night I'll be on a plane somewhere, and I'm returning after Pesach. So we'll do a class next week. Then we're gonna be out for 2 weeks, and then we'll resume after that. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right.
Great.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye. Thank you. All right.